When I'm walking down the street.
I do want to say to Doni and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
my head up.
I'm from South Carolina, so I just
got it.
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Morris?
Oh, my heart.
Happy 20th anniversary.
My heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? John.
And dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself. There's a
the doctor lived next door to the janitor, to the reverend, and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks either. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Doni, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it all the more.
letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you,
First name's Doni, last name's Glover, in it to win it for the long haul, baby. Good morning, everybody. Darius Hall in the house, the official mayor of Sandtown. So we've been working on improving this community, a 72 square block swath of land in historic West Baltimore for some time now. Going back to when Freddie Gray happened in 2015, we've had dozens of community meetings. And oh Lord, it has been challenging. But if you keep swinging, it's kind of like that fly that lands in a cup. Just keep pedaling, keep dog paddling, and sooner or later, the cat gonna come along and knock the cup of water over, and the fly lives to see another day. And that's kind of like how it is in Sandtown. Took a walk around the community this morning, and I am proud to report that despite some of the lingering challenges in this community, including Penn North, which is technically not Sandtown, one block out the way. Despite the pockets of despair, despite the hopelessness, you can see it on the faces of the people. There is hope. Despite it all, there is hope. There are also havens in the community. There are also parts of the community where the people refuse to be inundated with trash. I mean, trash. If there's one thing that if I could wave a wand and change like that, it would be the trash. Right over on Lawrence Street yesterday, some people set up for, opposite the Avenue Market, people set up for some type of concert. Somebody was playing music. But they cleaned up the trash right there where the kids are. I can only tell you that cleanliness is next to godliness. And if you're going to hang out all day in a particular part of Baltimore, pick up the damn trash. But without further ado, we're going to get to a guest who is also interested in making a difference in Sandtown. Some of you know him. Some of you know him from his long history in politics, his family's involvement in politics, but this is kind of a rebirth, if you will. And we are glad to have him on the show. Without further ado, we bring to you former state senator, John Pica.
Hi, Doni.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
For those who don't know who former state senator John Pica is, why don't you reintroduce yourself.
Oh, sure. So I served. I was in the, pardon me. I was in the legislature for 20 years. I served 4 years in the House of Delegates, and 16 years in the Senate. So I had a full 20 years. I was chairman of the city senators and was deputy majority leader under Senator Clarence Blount. So I served with Senator Clarence Blount, Senator Larry Young. Senator Joan Conway followed me. She succeeded me in the Senate, and I was happy to play a role in making certain that Senator Conway became the state senator in that district. So I have a history of working with city officials and a history of legislation that has brought money to Baltimore as a poor jurisdiction. Right now, I'm working with Doni Glover on a project to bring Salvation Army's headquarters to Sandtown. And we're very hopeful that that program will work and will take over a school that's been abandoned since, I think, 2003, early 2000s. Right now, it's a huge building we're going to fill that building, not only with bricks and mortar, but with wonderful programs to help kids, adults, and others who are struggling. So, Doni, I think we're going to bring about 50 to 70 jobs to Sandtown that currently do not exist, and wonderful programs. So in addition to the current programs run by Salvation Army, we've applied for a capital grant with the governor, and we're going to bring the following programs to Sandtown: a performing arts center, so young children and adolescents and adults can practice and learn and perfect their skills at visual and performing arts in partnership with the Peabody Institute and Johns Hopkins University. We're going to have a commercial kitchen. We're teaching culinary skills to individuals who are interested in working in restaurants as a chef or as a cook. We're going to have a community center, an area where the Sandtown community can meet regularly and discuss different issues that affect your community. We plan to have a STEM program working with the Department of Education, teaching technical skills. We're going to have 2 full-size basketball courts. Hopefully we'll have an AAU program there, and we'll serve as a recreation center for the young men and women in Sandtown. We're going to have a garden show to teach gardening skills and to grow vegetables. Boys and Girls Club, it's an after-school program. A seniors program, a seniors cafe where seniors can go every day until 11 a.m. and have coffee, play pinochle, play poker, play whatever card they like. We're going to have a playground for children, a splash pad that will help kids who are in the sweltering heat, and a playground and picnic areas. So this is a transformative project for Sandtown, and I'm very happy to be working with Doni Glover, who's on their board, and the people at Salvation Army.
Why do you care?
What's that?
Why do you care?
That's a good question, and a question that I can't answer. Only my heart can. I worked with many communities in Baltimore, and I worked with primarily Senator Larry Young and Senator Clarence Blount on working with communities and working on legislation that would bring money to Baltimore. I sponsored a bill that allows, it became a model bill throughout the country, a bill that would allow community individuals to evict drug dealers. I'm not sure how often it's used today, but it's a program that became a model program for for the country. Other states passed it after we did. And Doni, we have a lot in common as an Italian American and as an African American. We share a lot of the same values. Our heart feels for people who are in need, those who are disadvantaged. And I think my association with African Americans in Baltimore shows that. So why do I care? It's a hard question to answer. It just comes from the heart.
Mass incarceration has wreaked havoc. America incarcerates at a higher rate than any nation on earth. We have almost as many prisoners, inmates, as does China. We have what, 400 million people in the United States. They have 1.4 billion people. No other nation on earth incarcerates more African Americans. The closest one is Great Britain, who incarcerates African Americans at such a high rate. The impact of mass incarceration, the impact of President Bill Clinton's the laws that he passed with the 1994 omnibus crime bill, has led to fractured, if not broken, families. So when we look around the city of Baltimore today and we see so many young people acting without remorse, acting violently, acting so off the chain, I think much of the challenge is the fact that there aren't a lot of men in their lives. We are making babies and not raising babies. Any thoughts on how to reverse the downward spiral of mass incarceration?
Well, you mentioned how disproportionate the number of individuals are incarcerated in America. We have less than 5% of the world population, but we incarcerate 25% of all the prisoners in the world. So there has to be some kind of balance between who goes to prison and the laws we have that in the last few years are allowing a little more lawlessness at a minor level, which could grow into something larger or more criminal. But Doni, I don't know that the state can fix this. This is a federal problem. Years ago, we had a lot more money come into Baltimore, and it's society in general that has somewhat diminished all people. The standards are not as high as they once were in America. Just little things that have grown. This computer has made a lot of people stay home and not work. This computer has put a lot of people out of business. But let me try to answer your question. If you go back to Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, when we had urban development action grants and revenue sharing, a lot of money was funneled to urban areas. And the decay in urban areas can be directly linked to the diminution or the drop in federal money that was coming to urban areas. So if you look at St. Louis, Chicago, Baltimore, you'll see that federal funds have dropped precipitously. Baltimore only makes, you and I had this conversation recently, 43% of its money comes from its two main taxing sources, where all the other 23 counties, it's double that. They get 80% of their money from property tax. We have a lot of issues in Baltimore that affect the way that money comes in. So today, politics has changed. When I was in the Senate, we had a lot of cooperation from Republicans. That is not happening anymore at all. we had a cooperation from a lot of Democrats from Baltimore County and Anne Arundel County. That's not happening to the degree it once did. So, Doni, it happens with values and morals, and it happens with strong families. And legislation can't fix that. But we can create reentry programs for prisoners who are just coming out of prison. We can create programs that lead to jobs, but the real jobs programs need to come from the federal government. Back when Senator Patrick Moynihan was the undersecretary at the Department of Labor, he railed against the welfare system. He said, we don't need welfare. We need jobs and education. We need a job for that father, so that father comes to the dinner table every night with his kids and works with them and talks about homework and what you're doing. And that's what you talked about when you said fathers aren't there as much as they once were. You ought to read, believe it or not, it's called the White Paper, for lack of a better term. But it's written by Daniel Patrick Moynihan back in the mid-'60s. It's called the White Paper, where he thought we don't want welfare. Yes, there's a need for public assistance, but create jobs for everyone. And look, we had a black president with a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. What was done for the poor and disadvantaged in this country in those 4 years that Democrats controlled the White House and Congress? You know the answer to that question. So at some point, it's the federal government that needs to care. You talk about reparations, you talk about bring jobs and money to the cities, bring pride with people and instill pride inside people, and you'll see change. It's not going to happen overnight. And Doni, I don't know that it's going to happen at all with this government. This government seems to care more about corporate America than it does poor America.
Tell me a little bit about Italian American history.
Well, Italians came to this country, and if you take a look at what happened with abolition, post-slavery, a lot of African Americans left the South for good reason and moved north. That cheap labor was then supplanted by Italian Americans. The first, I hate to bring this up, but the first lynchings in this country were of Italian Americans. There were many Italian Americans who were wrongfully convicted, given the electric chair, and Italians shared that level of discrimination with African Americans, and it's an interesting story. But when they executed 2 Italian Americans for crimes they didn't commit, and when they lynched 11 African Americans in New Orleans for a crime they didn't commit, the Italian government, and this is going to seem funny, threatened to declare war against the United States after World War I. Now, America had no naval power at all after World War I, just about disarmed. Italy had the 4th largest naval power in the country.
In the world.
In the world. And they threatened to declare war. That's how Columbus Day was, as one of the concessions to Italy. America started Columbus Day. We didn't know too much about Columbus back then. We know more now. Some of it is revised history. I'm sure much of it is true. But Italians suffered through discrimination through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. If you look at ghettos in urban areas, you'll find that's where African Americans, Italians, and Jews lived because nobody wanted them. The house I was born in had no plumbing. You wanted to take a shower, you had to go around the corner to the bathhouse. Somebody brought a block of ice every Friday, and that's how you kept your food fresh and you kept it from spoiling. A lot of this is not remembered anymore, but as a young kid, I remember the jokes about Italian Americans. We were not allowed to join swim clubs. We weren't allowed to join country clubs. So there was a gentleman named Joe Carsonetti who owned a farm up on Harford Road, back when there were farms on Harford Road. And a bunch of Italians went out there. We built our own swimming pool and a grill, and we had our own little Italian country club. So back before, I'd say before the 60s, most of it was more acute and prevalent, discrimination against Italian Americans.
Tell me about Joan Carter Conway.
That's my sister.
Who is she to you?
She's my sister. I tease her a lot because she's a lot older than I am.
Oh, you know there's going to be a fight now. You know you just started something.
Is she coming? Is she on that?
I wouldn't do that to you.
She's only a year older than I am. So for those in the audience today who understand how a vacancy is filled, it's filled by the State Central Committee. Back then now the city has, I think, 7 Central Committee members per every district, every Senate district. At the time, we had 5. And I was the first Italian elected out to the Senate in Northeast Baltimore. There had never been an African American who even was asked to be on a ticket. So I selected Senator Conway to be on my ticket after our friend Kenny Webster brought up Tim Conway, a West Baltimore brother, yes, to him as well. And Tim, I said to Kenny Webster, what is Tim doing here? Go get his wife. I want her. And she lost narrowly. And then the following year, she was elected to the council. I left the Senate and controlled the number of votes thank you for that. Thank you for that last chat that came in about DeSantis. Anyway, he's going to self-destruct. Don't worry about him. So we got the votes to get Joan Conway in the Senate, and then she just excelled. I mean, she accelerated her upward ladder faster than I did and faster than anyone else in the history of that Senate. She was a vice chair after her first term and a chair after her second term. And she gave Mike Miller a fit. So
yes, she did.
She was a fighter. If Miller thought I gave him a hard time, I said, wait till you see what's coming. And Joan is just a wonderful lady, and she's like a sister to me. My son works with me. He's in the next room. I can't tell you how many times she held him and fed him a bottle. She was over our house constantly. She was a friend socially as well as politically.
Where do you see the state of Maryland headed?
Well, I mean, the state is with Governor Moore.
Let me just slide this in. Since you have been gone from political office, we've had 2 Republican governors, the first being Ehrlich, and he was the first Republican governor in 36 years.
Yeah.
Just take me back to 2002 when Kathleen Kennedy Townsend chose Admiral Charles R. Larson, the retired admiral, as a running mate and ended up getting spanked by what one of my mentors called a spear thrower for Newt Gingrich. He was hard on Bobby Ehrlich, but what were you thinking back in 2002? What did you see?
Well, we didn't necessarily see a loss coming until the very end when the polls were just about even for both candidates. I don't know that this is Kathleen's fault, but it was not a very effective campaign. So the candidate does have to take some blame for that, obviously. But the campaign was run by outsiders. It was the beginning of this consultant type where they didn't care as much or didn't place as much significance on local leaders. And I mentioned this to you before. I pleaded with her campaign to name Senator Clarence Blount as lieutenant governor. And it just fell on deaf ears. Politics has changed dramatically. But if you look at how Ehrlich got in, Ehrlich came in after Paris Glendenning. There's usually fatigue after 8 years of any leader. There was clearly fatigue after Glendenning, and there was definitely fatigue after O'Malley. And those elections ended up going to Republicans. We see that the Republicans, their theory of helping poor America never really has worked. In theory, it makes sense, but in practice, it never trickles down. Too many people take a bite out of it or drink out of it before it trickles down to the poor. But we've had liberal leaders in this country. Nothing has really changed. Although I'll say this, when I was a kid, if I ventured out, if I jumped on the number 8 bus, whether I was riding on the back of it, on the fender, or whether I had enough money to get inside, when you went to Sandtown Mall, you didn't see African Americans. There wasn't as much wealth among African Americans as there is today. And there really is real wealth among African Americans. But in the cities, in those areas where there's desperation, there's crime, there's trash, and there's a lack of hope among a lot of people. But Doni, people like you are the ones who give others who don't have your platform a lot of hope. And I mean that. I think my car's going to get towed.
I don't want to be there. I thought it was yours.
Matthew, hold 1 second.
Okay, we'll take a pause. We're talking with Senator John Pica, and he's making sure he doesn't get towed.
I'm back.
Okay.
My car needs to get moved.
That right there, whoever it was had the decency to come and knock on your door.
Yeah.
It's not a black thing. It's not a white thing. It's not Italian. It's not non-Italian. It's just a people thing. What do we do to remove, to counter all of the isms, religion, political party? You went to this school, I went to that school. Where's the love, Senator Pica? Where is the love?
Well, first we got to get rid of this thing. This damn iPhone. That takes away. I mean, kids today, I tell my kids, can't you use punctuation when you send me a text message? Can't you use capital letters? Standards aren't what they used to be. Now that's not what's wrong with. I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people who do care, and you know that, Doni. Today,
meeting you was refreshing, actually.
Well, it was
first
the same
of
with
all, it's not too often that I meet non-African Americans who are as comfortable walking through Sandtown as I am.
Yeah,
well, who are not buying dope.
I'm comfortable. I'm a city boy, and we grew up hanging out with African Americans. We grew up fighting African Americans. It was different back then. It was, there was a certain level of bravado that you have as much as I do. Today, things are more egocentric. Things are more about me than they were about others. And I don't know. I don't know how that changes, but it changes with values. It changes with parenting. And if you were brought up a certain way, whether you were African American or whether you were Caucasian, your values are going to be what your parents taught you.
So
And
tell me about that. What did your parents instill in you? How did you not become disaffected by the color of someone's skin or their religion or what part of town they were from or their class and their station in life?
Yeah. Well, first thing my parents instilled in me was fear.
Very good.
I was afraid of my father, and
Damn
I can
right.
tell you, my mother delivered some of the beatings that were much worse than what my dad did. So I learned certain things because I didn't want to get in trouble. But you know, when you have a family, my mom was one of 15 kids. My dad was one of 5, and we were just taught to respect others. It's all about respect and appreciate the cultures of others. If you can't appreciate what others do and what others have gone through, well, then you're selfish. And you'll never really appreciate the beauty of God's tapestry the way it's meant to be appreciated. And that's what my parents taught me, to respect others and appreciate other people. It's easy. It's not hard to say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, please, and thank you. Those 4 or 5 things are all you need to start being a respectful individual. And that's what you have. And that's what I hope I have from my parents. And my dad was a wild man. Don't get me wrong. My dad was a character. And I've told you some of his stories. But, you know, my mom taught me to be close to Jesus Christ. And my father reminded me every day, hey, kid, you're still human. So I had that dichotomy within my house of a very religious woman and a very practical individual, my dad.
How'd you get into politics?
Look at that, Douglas and Jeffrey Page. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Oh, hi, Darius. Well, my dad was in office. My dad was a Baltimore City councilman. Back when Baltimore had 1/2 of the state's population. So Baltimore carried
What? Half of the population in the state?
half. We had 996,000 people, almost 1 million, and the state had 2 million people. That's all. That was in early 1960s. Have you read the book Not in My Neighborhood?
Antero Patella.
Yeah.
I'm familiar.
So you see what the transportation system was to help whites get out of Baltimore. That's what they wanted. They wanted to leave Baltimore City. And it created massive flight out of the city. But a Baltimore City councilman was more powerful back then than the president of the Maryland Senate. They controlled, because Baltimore City had 13 senators back then. Baltimore County had 1. The Eastern Shore had 3 or 4 before one man, one vote. So before one man, one vote, Baltimore City, Tommy D'Alessandro, when he was Big Tommy, when he was the mayor, he was as powerful as the governor. So to answer the question, I give long-winded answers. I'm sorry. To answer your question, my son just laughed. My dad was in politics, and I remember the political fundraisers. And I thought, I went to school at Villanova University, and I majored in political science. Not that that means a whole lot, but the interest in politics was there as a young kid. I remember I was Lyndon Johnson in my I was President Kennedy in my debate when I was in I represented Senator Kennedy running for president, and someone else represented. We had a debate. I'm sure I had no idea what I was talking about. I was in the 6th grade, but I was interested in politics back then. And then I remember talking to Captain Tony Imbruglia, Baltimore City Police Captain. And I told him what my plan was. I was 23, and I said, Captain Imbruglia, here's what I would like to do. He treated me to lunch at Valegia's. And I said, I want to go to law school and become an attorney. And then I want to work in the Attorney General's office. And then I want to be involved in community activities, community associations, and I want to help people from there. And after that, I want to run for office. And I want to know if you can help me. He said, I'll help you, but by the time you do that, I'll be dead. He said, there's an election in September. You run for the House of Delegates now, and I'll do all I can to help you. So I got in my car, and in the rearview mirror, I was making speeches, thinking I'm running for the House of Delegates, and that's what I did at 24 years old. And then I was able to get elected to the Senate 4 years later when Harry Hughes selected Joe Curran as his lieutenant governor, and I ran for the Senate 4 years later.
Were you the youngest state senator in the history of the state?
Up until Senator Bill Ferguson. So I was 28. Ferguson got into 27. I was a young man, and I learned from these giants who were there. Senator Blount was probably my closest. Larry Young, Senator Blount, Senator Young, and I did a lot together, a lot. Appointed jobs, appointments, and created programs. Larry Young and I worked on programs to allow kids to take the MTA school bus without having to pay a school fare. We worked on programs to provide lunches for kids. Our senators still care, but it's a little, politics is a little different now.
I got to ask you, do you remember Clarence Mitchell III at all?
Chocolate Thunder?
The bear.
Chocolate Thunder. He called me the Italian Stallion, and I called him Chocolate Thunder. Do I remember him? Oh, my God. He was my seatmate in committee. And a couple of times I had to elbow him when I heard a slight snore. But he was very close to me, and we were good friends. And Clarence had that spirit where he just made you feel you were part of him and he was part of you. He was a lot of fun. And Michael has the same personality. Michael took his place in the Senate and served for, I think, 2 sessions. And Michael was the same way. So I used to hang out with those guys. And the most fun we had was when we hung out with the guys who were in those jazz bands. Biddy
Woods.
Biddy Wood. Larry would be there. And those were Billy Murphy. Those were the days where we would actually sit and not want to leave, not want to go home. Just sit and talk. We learned so much from each other, and we fed off each other. It was it was a different time. It was just a different time. I wish it would come back.
Well, when we have conversations like this and people watch, they hopefully we will all learn how much we need each other. My dad would say, God was smart, son. He didn't put all of the natural resources in just one place. He spread them all across the world. I said, well, why? He said, so that we would be interdependent on each other. Nobody has everything. We need each other.
You're 100% correct. Well, look, we had that feeling just a week ago when you, Kenny, and I, my son, had lunch. And we're going to continue to do that. You know, Mr. Hall just said Larry was on healthcare. Larry was the chairman of the healthcare subcommittee in the Senate. I was on his subcommittee. Darius Hall is 100% correct. He was very powerful. And he used his power. I mean, he would walk the streets in West Baltimore and he couldn't get 100 feet before he would see 5-6 people asking him for help. And then when Joan Conway was here, when Senator Conway just didn't take care of people in her district, people from all around the city called her constantly. for assistance.
She did a lot of work here in Sandtown.
I bet.
I didn't know that. She ran the building up there on Mount Street, 1114. Highly involved. I had no idea. I came about on the scene just after she had left, because all I really knew of her was Northeast Baltimore. But I did know her husband, Tim, because he ran the boxing gym
Yes.
At North in Utah, at Utah Gardens. Him, Larry Middleton. And so you speak of so much history, even history in the Black community that a lot of Black people don't know. As we have 20 minutes or so left, I have to ask you a most critical question. What role did education play in your trajectory?
Oh, it was everything. It was everything. It was. I remember the nuns mostly, the school sisters of Notre Dame, and the fear they instilled in you. But learning how to write, learning how to comprehend, and learning how to share knowledge throughout my, at Mount St. Joseph, in grade school at St. Mary's Govans, and then at Villanova University. It just, education is not so, well, it is so much. There's an equal level of the experience of education. You can learn, but if you show up for your classes every day and you do your homework and you show up on time and you get the credits you need to advance to high school and to college, well, then you're trained. You're disciplined. And then there's what you learn. I mean, you can learn whatever you want to learn. I mean, you can learn as much. I mean, I just saw Oppenheimer, the movie. I'm never going to understand quantum physics, but I appreciate what it is. And I appreciate that people who go through and do quantum physics might not be able to put together a paragraph. So I learned the English side and the reading side, but the mathematics side is left to other people. And that's how we become well-rounded. Education was everything, to me at least, individually.
Now, did you play any
professors? I'm sorry.
Did you play any instrument?
No. I played lacrosse in college. I do play the drums now, but that's not as much, doesn't take as much brain power as it does to play a guitar or the piano, keyboards. But no. How about you? Are you a musician?
Yeah, I play the piano. But
that's wonderful.
I don't know about that. The drummer sets the beat.
You have to keep a beat. Now, I don't know that I can keep a beat for an entire 2.5, 3 minute song.
That's discipline. So there's a drummer that comes out of Baltimore named Dennis Chambers, and us locals hail him as the greatest drummer in the world.
Well, are you familiar with the Amen or Amen break? I am not. Yeah, that is an African-American drummer in a small African-American band created the break. Well, I can't do it. Well, but if you ever Google on YouTube, Amen, they pronounce it Amen. The Amen break was created by an individual that no drummer used prior to this drummer, and they have a page because this guy's never gotten a royalty from anybody. So if you steal somebody's lyrics, you're going to get sued. Everybody now uses that drum break when the different syncopation between a regular beat and then when you go into a new beat. This African-American drummer created that. So I actually made a contribution. On the page, it says, "We don't get any royalties. Feel free to make a contribution." And I did. Look at how many people stole guitar chords from Chuck Berry. Nobody played the guitar before Chuck Berry the way he did. He created all those chords that were copied and then emulated by every band in England that invaded as part of the British invasion.
Well, I'm going to look up dates because I got a challenge for you.
Uh-oh.
Now, he was born in 1926.
Who was?
Chuck Berry.
Yeah.
Well, there was a lady born in 1915, and her name was Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
Oh, really? Yeah.
She's known as the mother of rock and roll, the godmother of rock and roll.
I didn't know that. Rosetta Parks?
Tharpe, T as in Tom,
Oh.
Tharpe. She was
I
mean.
thought she said, what's I'm gonna look her up. What's it, Rosetta? How do you pronounce it? How do you spell her last name?
Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Thapee. See it right there?
Yeah, got it.
Sister Rosetta Tharpe. So, history is an important thing. Moving forward, what advice would you give community leaders? We've been fortunate. Salvation Army, Major Roger Glick, John is just John's just gun ho.
John's a soldier.
True soldier.
Yes,
loves history, loves Baltimore. And I am thankful to meet you, to meet John, because Baltimore, when you go back to, I don't know if you know about Mayor J. Barry Mahul, but J. Barry Mahul, he was the mayor from 1907 to 1911. He's known as the father of segregation. Back then, Roland Park had just been built. It was Baltimore's first suburban garden community. And the people in Roland Park didn't want outsiders, particularly black people, coming and moving into Roland Park. So
it was in their deed. It was in the deed at Roland Park.
Yeah, but that was then replicated. That policy, that illegal mindset was just replicated, not just in Baltimore, but across the country. And now look at us. It's I've realized that music, drugs, and poverty bring anybody together. You look at San Francisco, you look at Oakland, you look at Portland, Seattle, the homelessness, and then you look at the crystal meth, you look at the fentanyl, which comes from China. You think back to when China lost Hong Kong to Great Britain for 150 years. It was over opium.
Opium wars.
And so now the Chinese are kicking fentanyl, and they want us to implode as a nation. We're going to need each other. And we shouldn't just wait until wartime or when a 9/11 happens. We should have this love all of the time, because there's some white people that I would probably catch a bullet for, and there's some black people I would push in the harbor. So it's really not about race. It's really about people who care.
I understand. What my advice, and I'm no one to give advice, is just it's never going to stop. The work you need to do is never going to stop. Doni, you and I are when we do at God's will die, we're going to be working. We're never going to retire and sit still. The people who make changes are the people who never stop. And to those community leaders, God bless you. You keep on fighting. I got bad news. The fight never ends, because what you have in your heart never ends. And that caring and that passion, you just have to keep fighting. We worry about things. People like us worry about things. And Doni, you and I are going to die worrying about something. And that's what keeps us going. And that's what keeps us ticking.
All right, I want you to brag for a minute. I want you to tell me about Matthew.
Oh, Matthew's he's right here. Matthew, come here a second. Can I just show your face to Doni and his audience. So this is Matthew Pica, is just started working with us. He's 6'3".
How's it going, Donnie?
Professional golfer. You know, we're sometimes there is a line between fatherhood and friendship, and every once in a while I had to, not like my father did to me, but
Why?
First of all, he could
How did you not put hands on Matthew?
First of all, I'm not fast enough to run away from him anymore. He understands, just like you understand, I understand. But he's a great kid. He started with us in December, and he at some point this is gonna be his. So,
are you running for office one day, Matthew?
No, he's not.
Not in the cards. Not in the cards.
I wouldn't let him. I would never wish that on anybody, Donnie.
What?
Not today. Not today.
Why?
Well, I want him to have a family and enjoy himself. Politics, it does interrupt your family life. Thanks, Matthew. It does interrupt the family life, and it did it to me. As much as I like to think I was a good father, there were times I could have been places with my kids when I wasn't, and there are regrets you have. There are some politicians who are still steady and stable, keep an even path.
It's made you a better leader, though. And thank you to your family for sharing you with the rest of us.
You're very kind. You're very kind.
Well, but how many leaders in Annapolis have children? See, I don't need you making laws for me and my children when you don't know what it is to have children of your own. Now that I got a problem with. People without children cannot tell people with children what to do with their children because they don't know.
Yeah. Well, there is still a level of compassion in Annapolis. It's just politics has changed. It's different. You know, when I came here, there were 13 senators in Baltimore. There are only 5 now.
You reminded me, 5.
That's terrible because with that loss,
and you say it's going to probably go down even more.
It may. In the next census, it could be 4.
Unless we get a mayor who can attract people back to the city. I walked Sandtown today. I walked most of the periphery of the 72 square blocks of Sandtown. And although there are pockets of despair, it can be reversed because there are also havens in the community where they're not having trash. I saw the most beautiful thing on Monroe Street across from Flanagan this morning. I saw a man hosing down the sidewalk. Yeah. Across the street, I saw a man picking up trash. Like a day. Remember back in the day, they would put pine oil on the sidewalk and you'd walk past, or bleach, even down Housing, 417. They would spray it down, and despite the people who are urinated and tried to change the smell of the place, they put that pine oil down and changed everything. We need that Baltimore back. We need that Baltimore where people care, where people are pro-Baltimore. I have one last question for you.
Yes, sir.
How do we make Baltimore more pro-business? I swear to you, it's going to be the death of us. We chase people out with these exorbitant and inordinate taxes, just taxing people for no reason. O'Malley taxed the rain. I mean, damn.
Well,
and then they want to make him, did you see this? They're going to make him Secretary of Social Security. Damn, I'm going to move to another country. He's in charge of my Social Security. Damn.
Well, I'm the only guy who ever beat Martin O'Malley in an election.
Go ahead.
We're friends now. Corporations look at education system, the level of crime, and taxes. Baltimore.
Say it again. They look at education.
The education system, and if they want to move to Baltimore, they look at Baltimore's education system, the schools, the crime, and taxes. Baltimore City loses the argument on all three. And that's what hurts Baltimore. When we were younger, Donnie, the people who ran Union Trust, Equitable Bank, First National Bank, Maryland National Bank, they all were chairmen, and the presidents all lived in Baltimore. USF&G, he lived in Baltimore. All those leaders were here. We don't have any leaders. There's no corporate leadership in Baltimore City anymore at all. There's the GBC, but they're looking out for the GBC. They care, yeah, but it's not the same if those individuals who ran those companies actually were Baltimore citizens and grew up in Baltimore. They're all gone. It doesn't exist anymore. I think the last ones were Frank Bramble and Chip Mason. And now they're no longer at their companies. Alex Brown, you had these companies that they all lived in Baltimore. And when Baltimore had a problem, Mayor William Donald Schaefer would call them to City Hall and he would say, fix it. And they would fix it. That kind of leadership doesn't exist anymore. It's a different political model. And maybe it will work. It's going to take a long time to figure out if it's going to work. You know, Mayor Scott wants us to give him time to see if his criminal justice ideas are going to work. You know, it takes time. It takes time. But
any final thoughts?
thank you for what you do. Even if you just look at your introduction, you can see the spirit of what you're doing. So my final thoughts are thank you, and let's bring Salvation Army headquarters to Sandtown to help elevate that hope that we need in the area. You and I need to chat. I've got a meeting with Salvation Army in 2 minutes, and then you and I'll call you after. I want to come and walk through Sandtown again and have breakfast. We need to arrange that community meeting.
We're all ready. Senator Pica, thank you for caring. Thank you for preserving the legacy of your parents. And may we all preserve the legacy, the good stuff that our parents taught us. God bless you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Good morning, world.